it's Lindsay with the Creative Arrow, and today I'm going to show you how to make these really cute mini art journals by hand with basic supplies that you have at home. So this is an example of a finished one. I used scrapbook pages for the inside and a basic kind of thicker cardboard for the cover. I also ended up with 2 signatures that I sewed together with a simple sewing technique. So it's nice and sturdy, nothing's moving around, and it ends up being really cute and creative. I also added a ribbon that I tied with a bow. This gives it a little bit of an extra piece of flair and accent, and it also kind of helps it stay closed as I'm working in it. So it's super cute and adorable, and I can't wait to show you. So let's gather some supplies. First thing you're going to need is some scrapbook paper. I'm using the 12 by 12 size. I also use a metal ruler, a pair of scissors, a pencil. I use liquid Elmer's glue for this, as well as some basic thread. It doesn't have to be anything special. Any color will do. You also need a sewing needle. I have a really kind of fat one here that I used, as well as some duct tape. The prettier the duct tape, the better in my opinion. So I have this nice fancy tie-dyed kind that I used. You're also going to need something sharp. If you have clay tools, I just used a needle tool for this one. If you don't, you can find something else sharp around the house to use. And some ribbon for your closure. Any kind of ribbon will do. But choose something that'll make you, smile. So here you have it. Here are all the supplies you're going to need to make your adorable mini journal. So if you are ready, let's get going. This specific scrapbook paper that I'm using, I did get at the Dollar General. And it has nice, lovely designs on it at a super affordable cost. So what we're going to do first is we're going to make our signatures. So this is one that I previously made, and I'm going to show you exactly how I did that step by step. So the first thing I did is I took the perforated edge at the top, bent it over, and then slowly and carefully peeled that away. I didn't worry about whether or not it was super clean. I kind of think that the rough, torn edges adds a little bit of character to my pages, so I like that look. So I'm going to make sure that I do this on every single one of these. That way it is all one design. Here you can see I have the torn edge on the top, so I'm going to gather all of these, and we're going to focus now on folding them in half and making our cuts. So I'm folding them in half so that the torn edge is on the outside, and I'm just doing a little pinch right in the middle. I'm not sealing it or creasing it all the way down, just enough to know where that middle line is. So as you can see, middle line here and a middle line there. Then I'm going to take my metal ruler. Again, it helps if you have a larger one. I'm going to hold it firmly in place after I've lined it up with both of those middle edges, and then I'm just going to rip it. So now I have 2 pages of the same, and they both have a torn edge. And I'm going to repeat this step with all of the other pages so that I end up with 2 sets of every one. Now that I have all of my pages torn, we are going to focus on folding these in half and sealing them and creasing them. That way we have the beginnings of each signature. Since I have 2 different sets, I'm going to be working on 2 different signatures. And this is just so that I have more than one little mini book. If you're just working on one mini book, you can have these kind of alternate however you want to. Just make sure that if you have text or letters or words, that you have those facing up and not upside down. I did not pay attention to that, I'm gonna admit, when I first made these, so I do have a couple where the text is upside down, and it's not a super big deal, but if you're very particular about that, make sure that you pay attention. For my signatures, I end up using about 7 to 8 pages in each one and 2 signatures total. So now that I have all of my signatures made, we are going to work on the cover. So what I'm going to do for my cover is use a thin piece of cardboard that I got from a leftover sketchbook. So you can see here I'm going to use something similar to this one. And I need to make sure that it's at least 13 inches by 7 inches because we're going to cut it down. In order for it to fit around this whole thing, you can see it's not corrugated, so it's a thin piece of cardboard. You could also use a cereal box for this if you wanted. Just make sure that it's the family size cereal box. The standard size cereal boxes are a little too small. I think they're only 12 by 8 or something like that. So for this size of signatures, we need to go a little bit bigger. For my cover, I'm going to be measuring, I want about 6 1/8 inches from the inside of my binding to the outside edge. And you can check the chart that I'm attaching below, and I just showed you previously. So the total length is going to be 12 5/8, and the total height is going to be 6 1/4. So anytime I do my measurements, I make sure that I add 2 dashes, and that just makes sure that it is a perfectly straight line. And I like to check it often. So I keep adding my signatures to double check and triple check that it's going to fit and it's going to be the length that I want before I make any cuts, because you can always make adjustments at this stage. It's a lot harder to make adjustments once you start cutting. I do also leave 3/8 of an inch for my binding, and that's that bent part here in the middle. I forgot to videotape that part, so I did previously use the long metal ruler, and I kind of helped bend those areas so that I have that little bit of a book binding there in the middle. Now that I have all my marks made, I'm going to use a pencil and I'm going to lightly connect all of these dashes to end up with the outline of my cover. Once you have all of your lines drawn, then you can test your signatures one more time if you like to, and then if everything is matching up where you want it, it is time to start cutting. So I don't have a nice paper cutter, so I'm just going to use a pair of scissors. If you do have a paper cutter or something that'll make this nice straight line really quickly for you, you can use that. If not, just being careful with a pair of scissors will definitely get the job done. All right, so now we have a cover and signature pages. The only thing left to do is decorate our cover before we start our binding. So I have more 12 by 12 scrapbook paper, and I'm gonna pick some patterns that I think are super cute and also kind of complement each other, because one is gonna be the front cover and one is gonna be the back cover. I'm also trying to choose things that I didn't use inside my signatures. That way you don't have any of that kind of repeated patterns. I want these to be separate and kind of be a little more special. So testing the size here, I'm going to make sure that I flip it over so that all of the lines and mark making I do are going to be on the inside or the white area. That way I don't have to worry about like erasing it later. So I've attached a guide for you to make your measurements, and we're going to be adding a 1/2 inch to the top, the side edge that's not along the binding, and the bottom edge. So in total, our measurements are going to be 7 1/4 inches by 6 5/8. So as I'm measuring a 1/2 inch, I'm still making 2 marks. That way I can line them up to get perfectly straight lines. So I'm going all the way around these 3 edges, making a mark at a 1/2 inch and again at a 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to go back and draw that light line to give me those connected edges. The total measurement here from the top to the bottom ended up being about 7 1/8. So I'm going to go to the other side, go ahead and make that 7 1/8 mark so that I have it all the way across. So going back to my sample, you can see how the scrapbook paper folds over the inside edge of the cardboard cover, and it gives it a nice kind of clean look to it. So I'm going to go ahead and connect my dashes with my last some pencil lines up from the bottom of the cover edge with a 1/2 inch mark and another 1/2 inch mark, and that will be the finished outline for where all of my folds are going to be. So testing again with my cover, laying it on top before I make any sort of cuts. I'm also marking where the rim is so that I can draw that line as well and know that that is going to be the edge of my front cover design. Now it is time to get out the handy dandy scissors and cut along my solid edges for my front cover. Now that it's cut out, I'm going to line it up with my cover, making sure that my binding edge is flush. And then we're going to work on attaching our cover design to our cover. So I'm going to use Elmer's glue for this, and I'm just going to get a light layer spread all throughout, and I'm staying within those areas that I have marked with the pencil. I'm not going all the way to the edge because we haven't done that part yet. So I'm just staying within that first initial square. And the most important part of this is going to be, again, making sure that we line the cover up with the binding edge and we get that nice and flush. So while it's wet, make sure that you move it around and you get it exactly where you want it to be before you press down and kind of seal everything up. So running my finger over, I'm getting all of the excess glue that's kind of seeping out. Again, I don't want it on these parts yet because we need them to fold over before we glue any of those pieces. So now that we're glued, I'm going to take a pair of scissors and I'm actually going to cut some diagonal lines, clipping off the edges of my overlap paper. And this makes sure that it gets like a nice clean bend when we go to bend it, and you don't have any excess paper that you have to like fold over or kind of deal with. So these little diagonal cuts here actually end up being really, really perfect when we go to crease this. So in order to make the creases, I like to use both of my hands and kind of all of my fingers to gradually bend and fold and crease these edges before I even worry about gluing them. And that just kind of helps me make sure that everything is like fitting exactly where it needs to fit, and then it'll be a little bit easier for me to glue them as well. Going back to our example, you'll see that the top edge and the bottom edge are overlapped by the side edge a little bit, and I really like that look. So I'm actually going to be gluing down the top and the bottom edge first. So I'm going to take a little bit of Elmer's glue here, squeeze it out onto that flap, and then I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to have to hold it down for quite a while before I can release this, just to make sure that it's actually stuck. And again, wiping off any excess so that it's not gluey or messy. And then I'm going to repeat these steps on the bottom. And once these two sides are done, then I will do the same thing to the side. And here you have it. This is my front cover for my mini art journal. So now I'm going to do all of these steps and repeat it so that I have the back cover. Now that I have everything glued on, I have decorative sides for a front and back cover with beautiful overlapping on the inside. So as you can see for our example, the next step that we're going to do is our signature and our binding. To figure out the holes for the binding, I use a scrap piece of paper that is the same size as my cover, and then I fold it in half and crease it, and then I fold up a little bit from the bottom and crease that as well. This means that you end up with 3 different creases, and you can go over these with a pencil as well to make them a little more prevalent. These little dots indicate where my holes are going to be for the binding for my signature. So I line these up just inside the binding, and I make a dot at each point. And then I'm also going to do the same thing from the other side. So just inside the binding, I'm going to line this up, and then I'm going to lightly make 3 marks, 1 for each point. So when you're done, you should have a little bit of space between, and you should end up with 6 dots that all kind of line up with each other. If they don't line up with each other, then you need to make sure that they do. So I actually found that I needed to start from the same top and side edges to get those to be perfectly in line. And then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to darken them and thicken them a little bit more so they know exactly where I'm going to be making these dots. In order to make these puncture marks, I'm going to go to my needle tool. Again, if you don't have a needle tool, you can use an awl, or if you have something else that's sharp and pointy, just be careful that you don't stab yourself as you're making these punctures. So I have lifted up from my table and I am kind of holding it in the air, being very careful to avoid my fingers as I very carefully make a puncture in each one of those dots. And you can see it goes through the cover and it shows up on the other side. So now that I've done it on the cover, I'm also going to have to do it on each one of my signatures. So I'm going to use that same scrap paper, and I'm going to line it up again, making the dots so that I know exactly where everything's going. And then I'm going to be using my needle tool to puncture the whole signature at the same time. And the reason I do the whole signature at the same time is because if you take each one of these and separate them and make your hole individually, A, it's going to take you so much longer, and B, they still might not line up. So I have found that doing it all together at the same time is actually so much easier, as well as being so much more efficient and accurate. So I'm going to repeat the same steps with my other signature. Again, I have some text on this one, so I'm going to try and make sure it's facing upright. I find the middle signature and add the dots, and once I have the dots, I'm going to add my holes. So now it's time to add the thread. And as I mentioned before, this is just some basic, I think it's embroidery thread, so it's not super thick, but it's not terribly thin either. And I'm just going to cut off a decent amount here, and then I'm going to make a loop, and this is going to be what I use to kind of be the beginning. So this is going to go on the inside edge of my binding so that it's covered up later and you're not going to see it. Once you have your knot done, then you're going to go to the other edge of your thread and you're going to put this end through the needle, and then you're going to kind of pull it through so it's almost doubled up. So I'm actually going to thread through the middle section first and pull it all the way through. And then I'm going to find my first signature, and I'm going to go through the back end of the middle, and I'm going to pull this piece all the way through as well, and I'm going to pull it tight so that it meets my cover nice and close. Then I'm going to thread it back through my top hole of my signature, making sure that I'm lining it up with that first top hole in my cover, pulling that all the way through and pulling that tight as well. Once I have that pulled through, I'm going to take my needle and now I'm going to go to the bottom. So I'm going to push it through and then I'm going to make sure it's pushing through my signature. So I'm going through both the cover and the signature at this point. And once I have my needle worked all the way through, I'm going to pull my thread tight. And you might have to kind of tighten everything a little bit as you go to make sure that you don't have too much slack. Then I'm going to go back through the middle from where we started. Again, pulling everything all the way through and pulling it super tight. And now you have your first signature done. Again, test all of your loops. Make sure there isn't a lot of slack because you want this to be really sturdy and really tight. So once I found a little bit of slack, I pulled it again. And my first signature is in. So grabbing my second signature, I'm again checking the text, making sure it's lined up, and then I'm going to repeat the steps that I did with the first one. So going through the center first of my cover, pulling my thread taut, and then I'm going to go through the center line of my signature, making sure that it goes all the way until it meets my cover as well. Once I am through the center, then I'm going to go through the top hole of my signature and the top hole of my cover, pulling my needle through and then pulling my thread so it's tight again. And then I'm going to go through the bottom hole of my cover, the last remaining hole, and the bottom hole of my signature. Again, making sure it's going through both of those things and it's all lined up. And then I will be pulling everything tight as well as checking for slack. And once everything is tight and there's no slack, then I'm going to push the needle back through my center line so that it is coming back from where we started, and then we are going to tie it off. And this is going to be a perfectly finished and sealed binding. So to do the knot, I'm actually going to kind of thread this through both of the binding lines and then back in on itself and tie it tight. And I'm going to do this a couple times just to make sure that it doesn't come undone later and it's nice and secure. And once I have that nice and secure, I'm going to pull my needle free and then cut off the excess thread. So here it is. My signatures are in place and my binding is secure. There is a little bit of the thread showing, and honestly, I'm going to cover mine up with the duct tape just to give it a little bit more of a finished and polished look. If you like the threaded look and you want to leave it as is, you absolutely can. But I think that this is also going to help it from coming undone later, and it's going to be really secure. And depending on what tape you're using, it's going to look really stylish as well. So I'm going to start by pulling off enough that it goes the entire extent of my cover. And so you want to make sure that you have plenty on the top and plenty on the bottom. If there's a little bit left over, it's fine because we'll just trim that off. And I do want to make sure that I have kind of equal amounts that overlap onto the front cover and overlap onto the back cover. So I'm going to try to line my binding up right down the center of this duct tape. So it's a little tricky because obviously the duct tape's really sticky, but I'm going to start with the binding down the middle first, and then I'm going to work on trimming it. So it might take you a couple of tries to like get it right exactly where you want it. So play around with it a little bit. And then when you have it where you want it, trim off the excess before you start to fold it around, because it's going to be a lot easier to trim it now while it's flat than after, you start bending and folding it. Once you have it trimmed on the top and the bottom, now it's time to fold over. So you're going to start by smoothing out one side from the binding onto the cover. And then again, if you still have pieces that are hanging off, just trim those as you go. And then I'm going to flip it. I'm going to again start from the binding and go onto the cover once I'm happy with how it's laying and making sure that there aren't any air bubbles and everything's nice and smooth and flat. So there you have it. Now you know how to make your own mini art journals out of basic supplies that you have at home. It's a great way to save money as well as make something hands-on for yourself. I hope that you loved this video. Thank you so much for following along with me. And I can't wait to see what kind of mini art journals you guys make for yourselves. So if you did like this video, make sure to give me a thumbs up, leave me comments, and I will see you next time. Make sure to subscribe and check back often. I appreciate you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.